Hello, my friends. It's time for Thought Shifting Thursdays. So, what we're talking about today is Radical Gratitude 2. We did an exercise last time on Radical Gratitude. If you missed that video, go back and check last week's. You can see it easy on my series on Instagram or just scroll down on my page on Facebook. And so it's a powerful exercise about giving up resistance, simply about a situation in life, just giving up the resistance, relaxing into it. As you've heard me say over and over, what we resist not only persists, but magnifies. It becomes stronger. What we embrace, especially with love, becomes our ally, our teacher, our healer. And so in the exercise, it was thinking about a situation. I'm not going to go through the whole thing again, but just briefly review. Thinking about a situation and just giving up resistance to it, meaning you can still, make plans and take steps to improve the situation, but it means you're accepting it as a magical, as a beautiful opportunity for growth. And then you focus on an individual with whom you have conflict. And once again, you're just giving up that desire to change that person and accepting that person the way they are. And then what we find, everyone who does this exercise, is our efforts to improve on a situation, to create healthy boundaries with a person, all comes into play and becomes more creative and more effective when we give up the resistance and accept things as they are, starting from a place of inner peace. And then most importantly, with yourself. Think of of an attribute or something you don't like about yourself. And if you simply gave up the resistance, accept it and yourself exactly as you are, then obviously the steps to improve become easier and more effortless. My favorite quote of all time is by Carl Rogers, the founder of humanistic psychology, who said, I love this phrasing, "The curious paradox is, when I accept myself exactly as I am, only then can I change and grow." It's very profound, isn't it? So, I want to talk today, because I'm in the midst of teaching my class for the first time in several years, the class based on my book, The Magic of the Soul. And the curriculum now through Centers for Spiritual Living is called The Journey of the Soul. And I'm just really excited. We've got a class of like 25 people and just really diving deep into the practices and the philosophy of it. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about how the story of how this book got written and how it became a completely different book than I intended it to be. So originally, the idea was the magic of the soul, how to manifest what we want in life. And I felt I was pretty darn good at manifestation. At the time, this was when I was 40 years old, 24 years ago, during the writing of this book, I had a wonderful marriage of 13 years. I had a corporate job, six-figure income that was, I was respected and considered a star employee, star director for the company, star manager, and I was in great shape physically. I was an athlete. I was a tennis pro in my 20s and a martial artist in my 30s. And a funny thing happened on the way to the magic of the soul. Everything fell apart. So I became chronically ill of an illness that wasn't diagnosed for 3 years later. And my marriage of 13 years ended. The corporate job went away, in part due to my illness. And so it felt like everything that I was identified with at a personal level, at an egoic level, was just completely stripped away. So the illness was something that I was doing everything I could. Now, I'd been meditating since I was 18. I'd been in New Thought and spiritual New Thought since I was 23. I was in spiritual psychology at about 27. I started training in spiritual psychology, and so now I'm 40 years old, and and I'm chronically ill and I couldn't understand why. And so I'm using all of the practices that I learned, self-love, energy healing, spiritual mind treatment, throwing lightning bolts at it, and nothing is changing the conditions. And I went the traditional route, went to Mayo Clinic, they did a million tests, no diagnosis. And all the while, by the way, I'm resisting the experience. I'm resisting the symptoms. I'm thinking, how could this be happening to me after, all of the self-work that I've done? And so finally, and by the way, a little sidebar is that my father died at 42 of cancer that hadn't been diagnosed for several years. So I was continuing to become more and more sick. At times I couldn't get out of bed for weeks at a time. I couldn't carry on a conversation. I couldn't do what I'm doing now. I couldn't speak for more than 10 or 15 minutes without just being wiped out. I began to see the proverbial writing on the wall, like maybe, my time on this life journey is coming to an end soon. And so I decided in that moment of reflecting on that possibility that, you know what, if I am to die from this, I am going to use the process of dying to understand who I am as a spiritual being at the deepest level possible. And guess what happened? Well, here I am. So yes, I started to heal, but it was not a direct line of healing. It didn't happen overnight by any means. In fact, at one point I said to myself, this was later on when I was, getting somewhat better, but I still was a long way from 100%. And I thought, how long is this going to take? And so I actually intuitively asked myself, and the answer that I got was 5 years. And I thought, you know what? If in 5 years I can be 100%, I can live with that, because I wasn't sure I'd ever be well again. Actually, it took 10 years before I was 100%. But that's what I needed to hear, because 10 years I might not have been quite as excited about it, right? So what happened, though, it was my healing went in a cyclic fashion. So I would recognize that I would surrender, right? Surrender into what is, give up resistance to what is, and I'd start to feel better. And then I'd go back to and do something that I used to be able to do pretty well, like take a walk. I wasn't out playing basketball or playing tennis yet or doing martial arts, but I'd take a walk. That would put me back in bed, and then I would resist again, right? Because it felt so good just to have a little bit of energy back. And so then I would remember, oh yeah, it was that surrendering thing that got me feeling better. So I would surrender, and I would feel better. And then I would do something, and I'd feel worse, and I'd resist. And then I'd remember, surrender. It was not as though, it was actually my soul creating the absolute perfect circumstances for me to learn how to be in a consistent state of surrender. So I ask you this question: what would your life be in a consistent state of surrender or non-resistance? How do you think you would be approaching life? How would you approach your challenges in life if you were in a consistent state of surrender and non-resistance? And so what happened for the book then is the theme became somewhat different, right? Rather than being simply about manifesting what you want, or yes, it's magical to manifest everything you want in life. But what's even more magical, what's even more meaningful and profound, is to accept what we have, to be grateful for what we have. And not only the things that obviously bring us joy. That's regular gratitude, right? Being grateful for all my joys and blessings. What radical gratitude is being grateful for the things that are challenging me the most. In retrospect, as conscious beings, we can always look back and see, oh yeah, those things that really challenged me, that illness, that breakup, that's when I grew the most. So many people that I coach that go through breakups, and especially women who were married for 20, 30 years, and then they have a breakup, and they're totally identified and had given a lot of their power over to their husbands and it could work in reverse as well, men giving over their power for women. It's more common for women, especially in an older time when people who had been married for 25, 30 years, and then they break up and it's like they're lost and how do I find myself? And so it becomes a challenging and yet growth-inspiring time. And that's when people can learn who they really are, right? Really find out at a deep level who they are. And so in retrospect, we can see the blessing. What radical gratitude invites us to do is ask, what is the blessing in this challenge that I'm facing right now? Because we can see the blessing in retrospect, but what do we do when something really challenged comes to us? We usually resist, right? And guess what? It not only persists, but magnifies. And so when we look for the greater opportunity, the magic, the blessing, the greater freedom, joy, love that wants to emerge from a situation, then we are opening ourselves up to whatever wants to come through. We'll get the understanding, the blessing, the realization, the epiphany eventually, once we give up resistance. But if we give it up right away, then we can access it more quickly, right? And then we don't have to be in resistance, which causes stress. We open to possibilities instantly, and life gets more magical. Life gets better. I like to use the example of Suzanne Summers, who in one of our fires, mega fires we had years ago, her house was one of the ones that burnt down in the Malibu fires. And so she was interviewed, and she's standing there in front of the smoldering ashes of her home. And she was asked, "How do you feel right now?" And her instant answer, without a pause, was, "I know something good will come from this. I know something good will come from this." That's radical gratitude, right? So, what in your life are you resisting right now? What's the biggest challenge in your life? And what would it be like if you give up the resistance and simply ask, what is the blessing? What is the magic? What is the opportunity for growth? What is the greater freedom, joy, love that wants to be harvested from this experience? By asking that question, you move instantly from being a victim to being an accessor of power, a claimer of power, because you are looking for, you are harvesting that good that's coming from the experience. And this doesn't mean that we don't process and express the feelings that we may have. In fact, as I'm saying in the class that we're doing right now, and emphasizing, because not everyone gets this from the book, even though it is in there, people can kind of miss that or skip over it. And that is, if I can't accept a situation in my life, if it's just too big, then I can ask, what's the magic in my sadness or loss? And what I always find is the magic in my deepest pain is where I find my deepest love. The magic in my anger, whenever I have a strong anger, there's some important value that isn't being honored. And so by diving deep into the anger and discovering what's the magic there, then I can find the value. And when I'm focused on the value, then the anger has less power. Now I can move into constructive solution mode. In my deepest fear, when I dive deep into that, when I give up resistance, access the magic in my fear, there's creativity, there's sensitivity, there is compassion, right? And so all of this is about giving up resistance. Now in New Thought, we often hear the phrase, and it used to be taught this way, it's not fortunately anymore, but it does show up in subtle ways. And people who are practitioners of New Thought often will ask, when something bad happens, and it's only bad because a judgment I'm putting on it, right? is, what was the consciousness that created this? How did I draw this to me by virtue of the law of attraction? And by asking that question, how do you feel? Better, right? Not. You feel worse, right? Because now you're blaming yourself for creating it. So the better question to ask, because everything is for us, everything is being manifested for us by our expanded self, our highest self, our soul self, and it's always for our good. And so rather than asking, what did I do wrong to create this? What was the consciousness that created this? What is the greater freedom, joy, or love that wants to emerge from this situation? And most importantly, we give up judgment about ourselves. What's the greater freedom, joy, love that wants to emerge from anything that I don't like about myself? I said this to a new client today. And you've heard me say it before, and I'll say it again. A really simple practice for giving up resistance is anything that you don't like about yourself. Imagine that it is a small child coming to you. How would you want to respond to a small child that is fearful? If you say, I need to get over you, how will it respond? Because getting over is a subtle resistance. It'll become more fearful. It'll act out even more. What we resist not only persists, magnifies. So how would you want to approach a fearful child? I love you. I'll keep you safe. And now, bringing love to that part of yourself, to your own fear, is what redeems it, is what heals it. Bringing love to our pain is what then brings out the compassion and the deeper love. Bringing love and acceptance to our anger is what uncovers the value that wants to be expressed in the world. So let's take this into meditation and just take a nice deep breath. And this is a shorter version of the exercise that we did last week. Again, go back if you want to see that. And just imagine what it would be like to just give up resistance to everything. To just accept everything as a magical opportunity for growth, as an opportunity to harvest a greater freedom, joy, and especially love, to show up in the world with a higher vibration and expression of love. Give you a moment to reflect on this. Doesn't that feel good? So what I find and what I'm sensing that you're feeling right now is the only way to deep inner peace is through non-resistance, through radical gratitude, through embracing, not resisting. You know, the theme of the book, I know that the book would not have become a bestseller. It wouldn't have become a curriculum for Centers for Spiritual Living over the last 17 years. It wouldn't, I get letters and emails from people saying this is the most transformational book I've ever read. And none of that would have happened if not for that illness and my willingness to surrender into it and have it transform me, and therefore the message that I offer to the world through this book, other writings, through these videos, through my coaching, my teaching, my classes, and especially my retreats on Catalina Island. We got one spot left if you want to come for September 26th through 29th. All right, my friends, love you all, and we will see you next week. Be in joy, be in love, give up resistance, and man, just enjoy life. We're here for such a short time. Let's love each other. Let's forgive. Let's go deep. Let's embrace. Let's care for each other. Love you, my friends. Take care.